My name is Carolyn, but for all intents and purposes, you can refer to me as CJ. I'm recording this the day after my 24th birthday, actually. I have had this idea to start a YouTube channel for quite some time now, but I always found a reason not to. But I just kind of decided to go for it. So, yeah. Anyway, it took me a really long time to get to where I am today, and I've started being more open and honest with myself and with others about what I've been through, and I've had an overwhelmingly positive experience with sharing my just everything that's happened to me. A lot of it I would just post on Facebook, kind of unfiltered stream of consciousness on Facebook, and then refuse to really talk to anybody one-on-one about it because I just kind of wanted to put it out there, but I was very uncomfortable with the idea of being the center of attention. I couldn't say what had happened to me on a one-on-one basis or what I'd been through on a one-on-one basis, but if I was just writing it or saying it to no one in particular and no one had to read or watch what I said against their will, like I wasn't, telling someone and they weren't forced to sit there even if they were bored. If they saw it on Facebook, they could keep scrolling if they didn't want to read it. I really liked that part of it. I had this idea because I had so much internalized anger and hatred towards myself that I thought that the people who talked about it just wanted attention, or that, they just wanted to have problems. And as a result, I really kind of ignored a lot of my problems for like years. I struggled with a lot of different things, and I didn't tell anybody, I didn't do anything. I'd been through so much abuse that I thought that I was being overdramatic and that it wasn't, something you should share, that it was something you should keep private. And that just was not good for me. I'm not the kind of person who's very good at filtering what they say. And anybody who knows me will say that. There's a lot, so it's not the kind of thing I'm going to be able to make one or two videos about and be done talking about my life, which sounds kind of insane coming from someone who just turned 24 years old. But yeah, it's just a lot. I'd probably say trigger warning for anybody who may be sensitive to physical, emotional, sexual abuse, for anybody with an eating disorder. Those are probably the biggest things that you're going to have to watch out for that I'll be talking about. These are things that I didn't even accept about myself until recently. So I guess where I'll start from is the beginning. I was born in Pennsylvania. I live in Texas now. My parents were split up and divorced since I was 1 year old. I have one sister. She's 2 years older than me. We grew up with my mom on the weekdays and my dad on the weekends. And my mom worked really, really hard. God, I don't even know how many hours a week she worked. We were middle class, and it was important to her that she was able to provide as much as possible for her kids. I'm not going to be going into too many details with my mom because really, she was a great mom. She really was. And a lot of the things that I've had to come to terms with are unrelated to her. So just, my mom exists. You can file that away in a box. Good person. Worked a lot. Very hard worker. Loves her kids a lot. And has overcome so much generational trauma herself that, it's amazing. My dad is a complicated person. There's been quite a lot that's gone on with my dad. He will never seek psychological help, and I know that, which really breaks my heart. I think he'd benefit greatly from psychological help. He has some narcissistic tendencies. We're fairly certain he's got ADHD and OCD, which I inherited both, which is great. But throughout my childhood, he was verbally and emotionally abusive, and at some points physically abusive. And that's hard for me to really say because I love my dad a lot. It was hard for me to accept that someone can be narcissistic and not be like a supervillain. I had a discussion in therapy about that. I actually said, I don't think he's a narcissist because he's not 100% evil. And she told me narcissists are not, they're not necessarily just like, you know, cartoonish Bond villains. He was a bit of a hoarder, and, you know, he was mean, but he could also be fun. But, you know, I feel like I always have to say some positive parts too about him. But I wouldn't be making a YouTube channel about how messed up I am if my dad was fun all the time. I didn't have a bed at his house for a long time, and I mean, we had a bedroom, but he'd like hoarded a bunch of stuff in it, so we couldn't sleep in there. So I slept on an air mattress a lot of the time, and then also a couch, which he would periodically get a new couch, and then we would have a couch burning party on the top of the hill and invite all of our friends, and almost burn down half of the trees. So just a really interesting sort of thing in the first place. There's a lot I can get into with my dad, but for brevity's sake, I'm just gonna keep going. That'll be a separate video. We can talk about my dad and my stepmother. And then, you know, as I got older, I started really having anxiety, intense anxiety problems. I was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder and ADHD. Both ADHD was whenever I was like really young, and then reaffirmed several times as I got older. OCD I was diagnosed with first, I believe I was like 11. I was in like 5th grade. And there's a lot I can say about OCD. It's not just wanting to wash your hands. I started therapy and medication when I was, you know, 11, going into middle school. I was bullied pretty bad, so I switched to Catholic school. So, and I liked Catholic school a lot. I was there for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. I made a really good friend I still talk to fairly often. Love him dearly. He's like a brother to me. Yeah, that was actually an overwhelmingly positive experience for me, which usually when you hear Catholic school, it's not followed by, that was great. But personally, for me, I liked it. But where things got really rough for me was when I graduated from 8th grade and I went back to a public high school. Going into high school, I went to weight loss camp 4 summers in a row. The shortest amount of time, I believe, was 3 weeks. I mean, I say weight loss camp, but anybody who's been to a weight loss camp will tell you it's fat camp. And even though the counselors would say don't call it fat camp, guess what we're saying as soon as they turn their back? It's fat camp, because that's what it is. You know, that Disney movie Heavyweights, except not fun. There's no go-karts. It's like you only get to call your family 3 times a week. You have no cell phone. Everybody's fat, so at least you don't hate yourself as much when everybody else is also fat. I think it was my parents' solution to the fact that I was bullied for being fat. And then my dad just has some weird issues with eating and food. I don't know. All I know is there was a lot of screaming at me about my weight that by my dad that I don't remember. I just remember screaming, spit flying, rage. The heaviest I was before fat camp was probably like 180 pounds, which is a lot when you're, you know, 11 or 12 years old. But fat camp was not the answer. The first fat camp I went to was Camp Pocono Trails in Pennsylvania. Hated it. That was involuntary. I didn't want to go. I was dropped off there. And then the next year was Wellspring, Pennsylvania. I didn't want to go there either. And I think I was there for 6 weeks. I went there. And then I did another 2 years. I can't remember if the 3rd year was something I really wanted or not. The 4th year I wanted to go back because by then I'd made friends. And I also thought I was so hideously obese. Even though by then I was 150 pounds and I was 14 and I wasn't skinny, but I was barely overweight. They ended up sending me home after, I think, 2 weeks because my depression was so bad. So, yeah. Once I started public school again, it was a different district than before, but I was bullied quite a bit. So I didn't fit in. And I really relied on church a lot at that point. I'd like to preface this all by I'm not going to be someone who talks about religion, like at all. I'm not. At that point, my dad got remarried. She was really nice at first. It quickly went south. I won't pretend to know what's wrong with her. But she definitely has some issues with the fact that my dad has children that are not hers, I think. So things were starting to get bad at home for me at that point. A church friend introduced me to the first guy I'd ever date. We'll call him E, and not like that weird Lord Farquaad meme. That was like, I started dating him right before I went to fat camp for the last time and ended up being sent home. And at that point, I had kind of an eating disorder. The way my therapist at the time described it, it was body dysmorphia and disordered eating. When I met my first boyfriend, I thought that it was like the best thing ever because I felt like I could tell him anything. I thought he was like my best friend. I think probably out of all the people I've dated since, I probably had the most in common with him. We were fairly similar people, and it makes sense as to why we were introduced. I was like afraid of guys. I've always been afraid of men, and I think it's because of my dad. When someone who's supposed to love you is really mean and sometimes hits you, just men in general, I was terrified to even hold a boy's hand. The first warning sign that things with E weren't going to go the way that I wanted them to was when I was at his house, like one of the first times, and we were watching Monty Python and the Holy Grail. And I had my hand balled up in a fist because I was terrified of touching a person, of touching a guy. And he took my fingers and he peeled them back forcefully one by one so that he could hold my hand. And I don't remember the movie at all because I was so scared. It was just terrifying. I just was so nervous. And he started to pressure me to do things I wasn't comfortable with. But I didn't really know what to do. Something I'd heard a lot growing up was men only want one thing. In my family, a lot of men just kind of suck. So there's not too many positive male role models. I thought, saying no, even when I would try, and he'd get upset with me, I didn't think that there were really any other options, and I thought that's how things were going to be. I didn't think that I was going to have choice. That, I just thought if I wanted to have a boyfriend, that's what you do for boyfriends. You let them make you do stuff, even if you don't want to. Anytime anything happened between us that was sexual, I'd sob hysterically afterwards, and I would always say, I don't know what's wrong. I know now I can look back on it, it's because I'd say no, and it wasn't, I was really pressured into a lot of it, and saying no wasn't an option. It just was, that's what we're gonna do if I wanted to keep him around. And I was so beaten down from being sent to fat camp for years and being told, if you lose weight, maybe you'll look more like your sister. If you lose weight, maybe boys will be interested in you like they're interested in your sister. I hated myself a lot already to start with. And then the bullying that I experienced at my first high school, it was really awful. So just to give you an idea of my mindset at that point in time, I felt very alone. So E was like, it was such a big deal for me to have someone I felt like I could talk to. And I thought that if I did what he wanted me to do, that he would never leave me. And I don't really know how much detail to get into with what happened. I think that that's something that I'll save for a different video, but there was sexual assault. I had my spine fused around that time because I was hunched over at a 90-degree angle from something called Sherman's kyphosis. And the sexual assault happened like 2 weeks after that. I was on pain meds. I said no. And for a long time I questioned. It wasn't violent. It was someone I was dating. Does it count? Am I just a bitter ex-girlfriend? Is what I was convinced for years. But he broke up with me less than a month after that. And I'd gone to Catholic school. I didn't want to do anything before I was married. Like, I was really passionate about that. At that time, it was just about the most devastating thing that could have happened to me by somebody who was basically all that I had at that time. I really go back and forth between thinking he's a horrific, irredeemable person and believing that he was young and that he appears to be remorseful. And I think he went on to be diagnosed with some different mental health issues after the fact that, could possibly have contributed to his lack of self-awareness. And it's a complicated situation. I'd moved in with my dad and my stepmother, and things went badly very quickly. They were their marriage is still toxic to this day, but at that point in time, I mean, they'd be screaming at each other right outside my bedroom door. My stepmother threw a glass of iced tea at my dad's head and then made him clean it up. They would start fighting and then bring it into my bedroom and start screaming at me too and wanting to get me involved to say who was right. So things were just bad. And then after that happened and he broke up with me, my mental health went from 0 to -50 real fast. But I didn't know how to say it. I didn't know how exactly to say what was wrong. I didn't know how to describe it. I've actually found old journals of mine. I haven't had the stomach to read them yet. That's something I'm working up to. But they say things like, I don't understand why I feel so bad. This should be okay. Why am I not okay with this? Why is this happening to me? And that's just one page that I read. I don't even want to read the rest. I remember after it happened, getting in a car with my dad and thinking, can he tell that I'm dirty now? Can he tell that I'm not good anymore? It was bad. It was really bad. I was very alone. I started cutting myself. And that's something that I would do for 2 to 3 years, 15 through 18. I abruptly stopped taking my medication that I'd been on for years for OCD. And when I believe I was 16, I cut myself badly enough that I guess I finally felt like I needed help. I didn't know what to do. They brought me up to a hospital in Pittsburgh and I did an intake assessment, and I ended up spending a week in a hospital for other teenagers at risk of suicide. And at that point in time, I didn't even mention the word sexual assault or rape or sexual abuse, which I'd all gone through with E. And I wouldn't mention that to a counselor for almost a decade. I internalized it. I didn't tell anybody, really. I told my friends occasionally, very few friends. But I would tell them what happened, and then I would say, does that sound like rape? Was I raped? Is that what rape is? But it was consensual once afterwards. Does that mean that wasn't rape? It doesn't matter what happens before or afterwards. That doesn't change the fact. And that was something that took a really long time for me to accept. You really have to talk about stuff that happens to you, I've discovered. I didn't. And I developed binge eating disorder. But I mean, I gained 200 pounds in a year and a half. I just ate everything. And my dad used to tell me I wasted his money because he sent me to fat camp and then I gained weight. It always felt like it didn't matter why I was fat. All that it mattered was that I was fat. It didn't matter that I was really messed up, that I was cutting myself and suicidal. It was just, Carolyn's fat, Carolyn's grades are bad. Now I know I have post-traumatic stress disorder from not only E and the abuse and sexual assault from him, but also the verbal, mental, and physical abuse from my father and my stepmother. Every time I went through a breakup, it was like going through the sequence of events where I was assaulted and then dumped over and over again. I just relived it every time. But by the time I was a senior in high school, I flunked every class that wasn't mandatory to graduate. Things were bad at home. I didn't feel like I had a place to go. I had no future plans. I had no idea what I was doing. Life was just happening to me. I was not an active participant. Things weren't great. I was very alone again. at that point in my life. But I did meet my husband on Reddit, which is crazy to say. I dated him. I ended up following him to college. I literally didn't go to the college I was gonna go to. I followed him instead. It was a better school and they gave me better money, but still kind of insane to think of, as I was 17 and by the time I was committed to the college, we'd been dating for like 3 months. So I'd met him like twice in person. But things got progressively worse with my father and my stepmother. My binge eating was out of control. The heaviest I was 352 pounds, and that was when I was 19 years old. And I went to therapy, but I never really talked about the real things, like the real hard things, because I didn't know how to. Being with my husband, he was really the first person in my life who I felt I could genuinely just be myself. I could genuinely tell him what was going on, what had happened to me. He was just there for me. He'd never cared how much I weighed or what I looked like. He just wanted me to be happy and healthy, and he loved me and supported me. And that was so important, to have somebody who gave that unconditional love to me. And with his love and support, I decided to get the gastric sleeve surgery in 2017, I want to say. So that went well at first. The thing is, you don't get to weigh 350 pounds without something going really wrong. And I didn't talk about it in therapy. I didn't talk about how I got there. I didn't really consider how I got there. All I thought was, I want to be skinny and I want to be pretty. I lost 120 pounds, and then I started having heart problems. I started getting really sick when I stood up or when I took a bath. I was diagnosed with something called postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, or POTS. I had a heart arrhythmia. My cardiologist was convinced it was caused by the SSRIs I was on to treat my obsessive compulsive disorder, and he had me titer off of them over the course of 1 week. I went from the highest dose you can take of Zoloft to 0 milligrams of anything. That was when I was a senior in college, and my mental health took a sharp downturn. Because you can't go cold turkey off of SSRIs, especially not with obsessive compulsive disorder and depression. So I gained most of the weight back. So I went from 350 to 230, and then back up to by my wedding I was like 290. And then about this time last year I'd gotten back up to 330, but I finally started seeing a therapist. Again, I'd gone a few years without while I was in college. And the first time I ever saw her, I said, I was sexually assaulted and I should talk about it. As I've said to every therapist I've had since I was like 17 years old. I continued to see her for a year until I brought it up again. But back in 2017, I reached out to E, and I told him, what you did to me wasn't right. You assaulted me. And he said, yes, I did. And I'm sorry. And I'm glad that you found happiness and success despite what I did to you. That's what he said to me. And for some time that was good enough for me. But recently I just felt I had to tell people. I had to tell the people that knew me when it was happening but didn't know that it was happening. But I told his girlfriend in graphic detail what he did to me. And I told his girlfriend's mother and his girlfriend's sister. And I told his best friend that I was also friends with during that time. And I told my church friends who introduced me to him. And I posted about it on Facebook without going into specifics as to who it was and what had happened. But I just felt it was really important for people to know why I was such a mess for so long and how I'm working on myself. And it's an uncomfortable thing for me. It is. There's so much shame and stigma attached to sexual assault. That literally only happened like 2 months ago. So 2021, 9 years after the assault. But I've gotten at least 3 or 4 messages from people telling me that it meant a lot to them that I shared my experience and that it made them feel more comfortable to share their own. I was able to give someone who reached out to me recently resources and tell them, you know, that it's really important to process it. And that means so much to me. There's a lot to confront. I do therapy twice a week, and I still have a lot of PTSD issues. It's really my primary mental health issue right now. That's a hard pill to swallow when you know that your fear is not based in reality, but it's based in things that have happened to you. So, but I listened to the I Survived podcast. It was recommended by My Favorite Murder, which is a podcast I really like. And I also used to watch I Survived as a kid, which would give me a lot of anxiety, because I was an anxious child and an anxious person in general. Surprise. But there was a woman who'd survived a gruesome attack. She said never stop talking about it. Each time you talk about it, it'll get easier. And having people know is really important for me, I've discovered. In the past, it's been suggested to me that I journal, but that always just feels like I'm screaming into the abyss. I need it to be acknowledged, what happened to me, because it wasn't for 10 years. Talking about it gives me the power back that I didn't have when I was alone and scared and hurt and devastated. I feel like I want to put it out there. What happened to me, what I've been through, and how I've gotten through a lot of it now. And even though things are hard right now, I think my mental health is better than it's ever been, honestly. Even though right now I'm going through a lot of post-traumatic stress symptoms, I'm confronting it. I'm allowing myself to feel everything I didn't allow myself to feel at 15. And that's so important. It's so important. And I've started having creative outlets again. I felt more like myself. I felt more motivated. I don't hate myself nearly as much as I used to. There's a lot of shit in my life. I'm only 24. I've had a multitude of surgeries. I've been sexually assaulted. I've been abused by family. And my weight has gone up 200, down 120, up 100, and then down another 100. I'm actually down to 240 now, so I'm almost 100 pounds. So it's a lot. And I want to share it because I was so alone for so long. And I don't want other people to feel that way. I want other people to know that it's possible to get through it, because I really thought things would never get better for me. And hearing other people say that, I was always like, yeah, but your life wasn't like mine. But no, a lot of people have lives like mine. A lot of people get depressed. A lot of people are sexually assaulted. A lot of people go through intense emotional, physical abuse and come out the other side. And I want to do that too. I want to continue to grow as a person, and I want to make a difference. So anyway, lastly, I just want to kind of acknowledge some of my inspiration to do this. I was inspired by Promising Young Woman. I'm also actually really inspired by George Watsky. I've been a fan of him since I was like 13. He has a lot of really fantastic music. I was actually inspired. I'm intending on calling this channel something like Wounded Healer. That was a song of his, which I actually did not know until recently that it is a term used by Carl Jung, one of the founders of like modern counseling and psychology. And it is also, he derived that from Greek mythology, and it talks about people who have been hurt, psychologically or physically, and choose to channel that energy and pain into trying to heal themselves and others. And that's really my goal. I want to work towards healing myself, looking inwards, and coming to terms with everything that's happened. And I want to be able to help other people. I was also really inspired by Bo Burnham and his new recent his new special inside. But yeah, I will post again soon and go through some things that have happened to me and share what I've learned, because I think what I've learned is important. So thank you for watching, and I hope to make another video soon.